The all-hands meeting invitation arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Subject line: company update, mandatory attendance. Time: Thursday 9 a.m. No agenda. No context. Just the ominous phrase mandatory attendance that meant management had news they wanted to control the delivery of. I'd seen this pattern before. Urgent all-hands with no details usually meant layoffs, restructuring, or some other announcement designed to create anxiety and compliance through uncertainty. But unlike the other 200 employees who received that invitation, I wasn't worried. Because 3 days earlier I'd accepted a senior engineering manager position at Apex Technologies, a 30% salary increase, better equity package, and leadership over a team twice the size I currently manage. My resignation letter was drafted. My start date at Apex was negotiated. I was just waiting for the right moment to tell my current employer, Data Core Systems, that I was leaving. Turns out, the right moment was about to present itself. Thursday morning, I filed into the conference room with the rest of the engineering team. The energy was tense, people whispering speculation about what the meeting would cover, nervous glances exchanged, a few people who'd clearly heard rumors and looked resigned. Our CEO, Michael Bradford, stood at the front with our CFO, Linda Chen, and VP of Engineering, Marcus Sullivan. The executive expressions were serious but controlled, the look of people who've rehearsed difficult messaging. "Thank you all for being here," Michael started. "I want to be direct. DataCore has been facing increased competition and margin pressure. Our board has made the decision that we need to significantly reduce our cost structure to remain competitive and position ourselves for long-term sustainability." Translation: layoffs were coming. Over the next 2 months, we'll be implementing a restructuring that will reduce headcount by approximately 25% across all departments. Engineering will be affected proportionally. We'll be scheduling individual conversations over the next 2 weeks to inform people whether their roles are affected. The room was silent. 200 people processing that 1 in 4 of them would be gone in 2 months. "I know this is difficult news," Michael continued. "But I want to assure you that for those who remain, DataCore will be a stronger company with better growth prospects. We're making these difficult decisions now to ensure we don't have to make them again later." Standard layoff messaging: "We're doing this for the good of everyone. It'll be better on the other side. Trust us that cutting 25% of the workforce will somehow improve things for the 75% who remain." Michael opened for questions. Most people were too shocked or scared to say anything. A few asked about severance packages, healthcare continuation, timeline for notifications. I raised my hand. "Jordan, go ahead," Michael said. "You mentioned individual conversations over the next 2 weeks to inform people whether their roles are affected. Does that mean you've already determined who's being laid off? Or are those decisions still being made? The specific individuals have been identified. The conversations will confirm those decisions. So for the next 2 weeks, everyone in this room will be wondering whether they're in the 25% being let go, with no information until you schedule their individual meeting." "That's the plan." Michael's expression tightened. "We're moving as quickly as possible to provide clarity. With respect, that's not clarity. That's 2 weeks of managed anxiety where people can't plan, can't make decisions, can't do anything except wait to find out if they still have jobs. You've decided who's being laid off, but you're stretching the announcement over 2 weeks to control the process, rather than giving people information they need to manage their lives." "Jordan, I understand the uncertainty is difficult, but we have legal and operational considerations. I'm sure you do. I just wanted to clarify for everyone in this room that the decisions have been made. The names are already on the list, and the 2-week timeline is about company convenience, not employee consideration." The room had gone very quiet. You could feel the tension. Part agreement with what I was saying, part discomfort that I was saying it so directly to the CEO. Michael moved on to the next question, but the damage to his messaging was done. Everyone now understood that the uncertainty they'd be living with for 2 weeks wasn't because decisions were still being made. It was because management wanted to control the rollout. After the meeting, several colleagues approached me quietly. "Jordan, that was bold. Aren't you worried about being on the layoff list?" I smiled. "Not particularly. You must have more confidence in your position than I do," something like that. That afternoon, I had a scheduled one-on-one with Marcus Sullivan, my VP of Engineering. I'd been planning to use this meeting to submit my resignation, but I was curious what Marcus would say about the restructuring first. Jordan, I wanted to talk about this morning's announcement, Marcus started. I know it's unsettling news, but I want you to know that you're not on the affected list. Your role is secure. That's good to know. In fact, with the restructuring, you'll likely be taking on additional responsibilities. We're eliminating the principal engineer role on your team, so you'll be absorbing some of those technical leadership functions along with your current management duties. So I'll be doing more work for the same compensation while watching. Colleagues get laid off? Well, we can't discuss compensation changes right now, given the cost reduction focus, but long-term there will be opportunities. Marcus, let me save you some time. I'm resigning. I've accepted a senior engineering manager position at Apex Technologies. My last day will be 2 weeks from today. Marcus stared at me. You're leaving now? In the middle of a restructuring? I'm leaving because I accepted a better opportunity. The restructuring is irrelevant to my decision. I accepted the Apex offer before this morning's announcement. Jordan, this is terrible timing. We need experienced engineering leadership to help manage the transition. You need experienced engineering leadership because you're laying off 25% of the workforce. That's a problem you created, not one I'm obligated to help you solve. We've invested in your development, and I've delivered strong results for 3 years. I've led successful projects, mentored junior engineers, and consistently exceeded expectations. The company has gotten excellent value from that investment. But I don't owe Datacore my career trajectory, especially not when I have opportunities elsewhere that better align with my goals. Marcus changed tactics. What would it take to keep you? We could potentially accelerate some compensation discussions. Marcus, I've already accepted the Apex offer. Signed the offer letter. Negotiated my start date. This isn't a negotiation for a counteroffer. This is notification that I'm leaving. You didn't give us a chance to match. I didn't give you a chance to match because I didn't want you to match. I want to leave. Apex is a better opportunity, better compensation, better role, better growth trajectory. The restructuring just confirms I'm making the right decision. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to understand something about this moment. This wasn't about perfect timing or lucky circumstances. This was about recognizing months earlier that Datacore was headed for problems and proactively looking for better opportunities rather than waiting until I was forced out. If you've ever been in an organization where you saw restructuring coming before it was announced, if you've ever lined up your next move before your current employer realized you were leaving, if you've ever handed in resignation during a crisis and watched management panic because they needed you more than you needed them, stay with me. Because what happened when I told a struggling company I was leaving, after they just announced they were cutting a quarter of their workforce, showed exactly why timing matters when you control it. My name is Jordan Hayes, and I've been engineering manager at Datacore Systems for 3 years. I led a team of 12 engineers working on data infrastructure and analytics platforms for enterprise clients. For the first 2.5 years, Datacore had been a solid company. Growing revenue, strong product market fit, reasonable work-life balance, competitive compensation. Not perfect, but good enough that I wasn't actively looking to leave. But 6 months ago, things had started changing. Projects being delayed because leadership couldn't make decisions. Budget constraints creating resource shortages. Sales targets being missed consistently. Executives leaving for other opportunities with surprising frequency. The signs were there if you paid attention. Company struggling, restructuring probably coming, job security at risk. So I'd started looking. Not frantically, not desperately, but strategically. Updated my LinkedIn. Reached out to former colleagues at other companies. Had conversations with recruiters. Explored what opportunities were available for engineering managers with my experience level. 4 months ago, I connected with a recruiter working with Apex Technologies. 3 months ago, I had initial conversations with Apex's VP of Engineering. 2 months ago, I'd gone through their full interview process. Technical assessments, leadership interviews, cultural fit discussions. 1 month ago, Apex had made me an offer, senior engineering manager, $165,000 salary, up from my current $130,000. Stronger equity package, leadership over a team of 22 engineers across 2 product areas. I'd negotiated the offer up slightly, $172,000 salary, additional equity, commitment to 2 weeks of training and transition support. Then I accepted. All of this happened while DataCore was spiraling toward the restructuring that had just been announced. While my colleagues were anxiously hoping their jobs would be secure, I'd already secured something better and was just waiting for the right moment to resign. That moment had arrived. Word spread quickly through the engineering team that I was leaving. By the end of the day, 5 people had messaged me asking if Apex was hiring for other roles. Jordan, I heard you're going to Apex. Do they have openings for senior engineers? Jordan, can you refer me if Apex needs back-end engineers? Jordan, I know you're leaving, but could you connect me with the recruiter you worked with? I referred 3 of my former colleagues to Apex's recruiting team. 2 of them would end up getting offers and joining Apex within the next 2 months, following me out of DataCore just as the restructuring was creating the chaos I'd anticipated. Friday morning, I received a meeting request from Linda Chen, our CFO. Subject line, discussion regarding your resignation. In her office, Linda got straight to the point. Jordan, Marcus told me you're resigning. I wanted to understand your reasoning and see if there's anything we can do to retain you. I've accepted a senior engineering manager position at Apex Technologies. Better compensation, bigger team, stronger growth opportunity. It's the right move for my career. I understand career growth is important. But Jordan, your timing creates significant challenges for us. We're in the middle of a major restructuring. We need experienced engineering leadership to help manage the transition. Your departure makes that much harder. I appreciate that my departure creates challenges. But Linda, the restructuring creates challenges for the 50 engineers who'll be laid off and the 150 who'll remain wondering when the next round of cuts is coming. My career decisions have to be based on what's best for me, not on what's most convenient for DataCore. We could potentially offer you a promotion to senior engineering manager here. At what salary? We'd need to discuss that, Linda. You just announced you're cutting 25% of headcount to reduce costs. You're not going to offer me a $40,000 raise, and bigger equity package when you're trying to reduce compensation expenses. The math doesn't work. Perhaps after the restructuring stabilizes, after the restructuring, you'll be asking people who survived the cuts to do more work for the same compensation. You'll be telling them to be grateful they still have jobs. That's not an environment where I want to build my career. So there's nothing we can offer that would change your decision? Nothing realistic. I've already been accepted at Apex. I've signed documents. I've negotiated a start date. This isn't a leverage play to get a counteroffer. This is me informing you that I'm leaving so we can manage the transition professionally. Linda's expression shifted from negotiation to assessment. How much of your team is likely to follow you? I haven't recruited anyone, but several people have asked me about opportunities at Apex. If you're asking whether your best engineers will stay at a company that's cutting 25% of headcount versus exploring opportunities at growing companies, I think you know the answer. We can't afford to lose more engineering talent during a restructuring. Then maybe you should have considered that before announcing layoffs. Or before letting compensation and culture deteriorate to the point where people like me started looking elsewhere. I didn't leave because of the restructuring announcement. I'd already accepted another offer before that. The restructuring just confirmed I was making the right decision. Over the weekend, I drafted my official resignation email with 2 weeks' notice. Monday morning, I sent it to Marcus, Linda, and HR with a detailed transition plan for my projects and team responsibilities. Marcus responded within an hour requesting a meeting to discuss critical knowledge transfer and whether I'd be willing to extend my notice period or work as a consultant during the transition. Jordan, 2 weeks isn't enough time to transfer 3 years of knowledge about our infrastructure architecture and ongoing projects. Would you consider a 4-week notice period? No. My start date at Apex is firm. 2 weeks is standard notice and adequate time to document critical information. What if we paid you consulting rates for a transition period after your last day? We could structure it as project-based consulting for specific knowledge transfer. Marcus, you're cutting 25% of headcount to reduce costs. You don't have a budget for high-rate consulting fees. And I don't want to be tied to DataCore through consulting arrangements when I'm trying to start a new role. The answer is no. Jordan, you're being unreasonable. We have critical projects that only you fully understand. If critical projects depend entirely on one person's knowledge, that's a documentation and organizational problem, not my personal obligation. I've been here 3 years. I've documented my work. I've trained team members. If there are knowledge gaps, those gaps existed before I resigned. You just didn't prioritize addressing them. This is going to create serious problems. For the engineering team, the restructuring is going to create serious problems for the engineering team. My departure is just one additional factor in a situation you created by deciding to lay off 50 engineers. Tuesday morning, I received a call from Michael Bradford, the CEO. I was surprised. CEOs don't usually get involved in individual resignations unless they're trying to make a point. Jordan, I heard you're leaving. I wanted to reach out personally to see if we could find a way to keep you at DataCore. I appreciate the call, Michael, but I've accepted another offer. My decision is final. I understand you have another opportunity, but I want you to know that you're exactly the kind of engineering leader we need to rebuild DataCore into what it should be. After this restructuring, we'll be leaner and more focused. There will be opportunities for people who stay and help us through this transition. Michael, with respect, I've heard opportunities after the pain messaging before. It usually means asking people to work harder for the same or less compensation while promising vague future rewards. I'm not interested. What would interest you? A time machine that prevents the decisions that led to needing a 25% headcount reduction. Since that's not available, I'm moving to a company that's growing, well-funded, and not laying people off. You're making a mistake. Companies that are growing too fast often have their own problems. Sustainability issues, culture problems, unsustainable expectations, maybe. But I'd rather deal with problems of success than problems of decline. DataCore is contracting. Apex is expanding. I'm choosing expansion. Jordan, I'm asking you directly, what would it take to change your mind? Nothing you can offer. But here's what I'd tell other engineers if they asked me whether to stay or leave. Stay if you're on the secure list and don't have better options. Leave if you have opportunities at growing companies, because this restructuring won't be the last difficult decision DataCore makes. Companies that cut 25% of headcount don't magically become healthy overnight. That's a cynical view. That's a realistic view based on watching what happens to companies after major layoffs. Morale problems, talent drain, increased workload on remaining employees, often followed by more cuts when the first round doesn't solve the fundamental business issues. I'm not being cynical. I'm being honest about what usually happens. Michael ended the call shortly after. I got the sense he'd made the call partly to retain me, but mostly to assess how many other engineers might be thinking of leaving. 2 days before my last day at DataCore, I had a team meeting with my 12 direct reports. Half of them were on the layoff list. They'd received their notifications over the past week. The other half were staying but dealing with the chaos of restructured teams and increased responsibilities. I wanted to talk to you all. Before I leave, I started. Some of you are being laid off, which is unfair and difficult. Some of you are staying, which comes with its own challenges. I want you to know, your value isn't determined by whether DataCore chose to keep or let you go. You're talented engineers. You'll find other opportunities. Sarah, one of my senior engineers who is being laid off, asked, Jordan, did you know this restructuring was coming when you accepted the Apex offer? I didn't know the specifics. But I saw signs that DataCore was struggling. Leadership turnover, budget constraints, missed targets. I didn't know there would be layoffs, but I knew the trajectory wasn't good. That's why I started looking. So you were already planning to leave before the announcement? Yes. I wasn't running from layoffs specifically. I was moving toward a better opportunity. The layoff announcement just happened to confirm my decision was well-timed. Tom, one of the engineers staying, asked, do you think there will be more cuts after this round? I don't know. But historically, when companies cut 25% of headcount, it's rarely the end. If the fundamental business problems aren't solved, and I don't think they are, there will be more cuts or more departures as people leave voluntarily for better opportunities. Should we be looking for other jobs? That's a personal decision. But I'd say, if you have opportunities to explore them. Don't wait until you're forced to look, because you're on the next layoff list. Be proactive about your career. 3 of my team members, the ones not being laid off, asked me to refer them to Apex. 2 would eventually join. My last day at DataCore was a Friday. I spent it documenting final project details, transferring credentials and access, and meeting with people who needed information before I left. At 4 p.m., Marcus asked to meet one final time. Jordan, I want to say, I'm frustrated about how this played out, but I respect that you made a decision that was right for your career. I wish we'd been able to create an environment where you wanted to stay. Marcus, you're a good manager working in a difficult situation. But the problems at DataCore are above your level. Leadership made decisions that put the company in a position where layoffs became necessary. That's not your fault, but it's also not something I wanted to stick around and experience. For what it's worth, I think you made the right call. If I had the same opportunities you did, I might make the same decision. Are you looking? Marcus smiled slightly. Let's just say I'm open to conversations. I left DataCore at 4:30 p.m. on a Friday, 3 weeks after they'd announced a 25% headcount reduction, with no regrets about my timing or decision. The following Monday, I started at Apex Technologies as Senior Engineering Manager. The contrast was immediate: growing team, active hiring, investment in tools and infrastructure, leadership focused on expansion rather than contraction. 3 months after I left DataCore, I heard through former colleagues that the company had implemented a second round of layoffs, another 15% headcount reduction. Marcus had left for another opportunity. Several engineers I'd worked with had followed me to Apex or found roles at other companies. The restructuring that was supposed to position DataCore for long-term sustainability had instead triggered a talent exodus that made their problems worse. 6 months after leaving DataCore, I was promoted to Director of Engineering at Apex, leading 3 teams totaling 45 engineers. My compensation had increased again, $195,000 salary plus stronger equity, as the company was tracking toward IPO. I, occasionally, got LinkedIn messages from former DataCore colleagues. Jordan, you made the right call leaving when you did. This place is a mess. Or, Jordan, do you know if Apex is hiring? I need to get out of DataCore. I helped where I could, making referrals, providing advice, connecting people with Apex recruiters. 7 former DataCore engineers ended up joining Apex over 18 months, creating a small alumni network. A year after the restructuring announcement, I was speaking at an engineering leadership conference. My session was titled, Career Timing, Knowing When to Leave Before You're Forced Out. A year ago, I told the audience, my company announced they were laying off 25% of the workforce. The announcement was designed to create anxiety. Weeks of uncertainty while management scheduled individual conversations to inform people whether they were affected. But I wasn't anxious. Because 3 days before that announcement, I'd accepted a senior engineering manager role at another company. Better compensation, bigger team, growing organization. I'd already decided to leave. When they announced the restructuring, I wasn't scared. I was validated. Because I'd seen the warning signs months earlier and acted on them rather than waiting to be forced out. Here's what I learned. Don't wait for restructuring announcements to start looking for your next opportunity. By the time layoffs are announced, it's too late to position yourself strategically. You're reacting to a crisis instead of planning your career. Watch for the signs: leadership, turnover, missed targets, budget constraints, projects getting canceled, executives leaving, increasing pressure with decreasing resources. Those are indicators that restructuring might be coming. When you see those signs, start exploring options. Not frantically, not desperately, but strategically. Update your network. Have conversations with recruiters. Interview at other companies. Understand what opportunities exist for someone with your skills. Then, if restructuring comes, you're not caught flat-footed. You might already have an offer. Or you're far enough along in other processes that you have options. Either way, you control your timing rather than letting the company control it. The week after that restructuring announcement at my old company, 5 people asked me to refer them to my new company. 3 ended up getting offers and leaving. Those were good engineers who would have stayed if the company had been stable. But once they saw layoffs happening, they wanted out. Companies that announce major layoffs don't just lose the people they cut. They lose people who survive the cuts but decide they'd rather work somewhere that's growing. That's the hidden cost of restructuring: talent drain from people who have options. After the presentation, a man in his 40s approached me. Jordan, I'm in a similar situation. My company has been struggling for months. No official announcement, but the signs are there. Should I start looking even though I haven't been told my job is at risk? Absolutely. The time to look is before you need to, not after. If your company announces layoffs next month and you haven't started exploring options, you'll be competing with everyone else who just got laid off, plus everyone who survived but wants to leave. Start now while you have time to be strategic. What if my company stabilizes and I end up leaving unnecessarily? Then you've explored the market, understand your value, know what opportunities exist, and made an informed decision about whether your current company is where you want to be. That's not wasted effort. That's career management. Won't it look bad if I interview at other companies and then stay at my current one? Companies interview candidates and then don't hire them all the time. There's no obligation to accept every offer you receive. Interview, get offers, evaluate options, make the best decision for your career. That's not being disloyal. That's being smart. 18 months after leaving DataCore, I was promoted again at Apex, VP of Engineering, overseeing all engineering teams across the company. I now led a department of 120 engineers with multiple directors reporting to me. DataCore, by contrast, had gone through 3 rounds of layoffs totaling about 45% headcount reduction. They'd lost most of their senior engineering talent, either through layoffs or voluntary departures. The company was limping along with a skeleton crew trying to maintain products they no longer had the expertise to properly develop. 2 years after the restructuring announcement, I ran into Michael Bradford, DataCore's former CEO, at an industry event. He'd left DataCore 6 months after I did, taking a coup role at another company. "Jordan, I wanted to say, you called it correctly. Everything you said about that restructuring and what would happen afterward turned out to be accurate. I'm sorry it played out that way. I know you were trying to save the company." I was. But I was also operating under constraints from the board that made it almost impossible to succeed. By the time we announced the first restructuring, the damage was done. Cutting headcount didn't fix the fundamental business problems. It just made talented people like you decide to leave. What would you do differently if you could go back, address the business problems before they required massive layoffs, make smaller adjustments earlier, be more transparent with the team about challenges, and accept that when you announce 25% cuts, you're not just losing the 25%, you're losing the best performers among the remaining 75% who have options elsewhere. That's what happened. I left. 7 of my former team members followed over the next year. The people who stayed were mostly people who didn't have better alternatives. I know. That's the death spiral. You cut costs to survive, which makes your best people leave, which makes execution harder, which creates more pressure to cut costs, which makes more good people leave. We couldn't break that cycle. What are you doing now? Trying to learn from those mistakes. The company I'm at now is growing. When I see business challenges emerging, I'm addressing them early rather than letting them compound until layoffs seem like the only option. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, I want you to understand something. This isn't about perfectly predicting the future or having lucky timing. It's about paying attention to signals that your current situation might be deteriorating and taking proactive action rather than waiting to be forced into reactive decisions. When I accepted the Apex offer 3 days before DataCore announced restructuring, it wasn't coincidence or insider information. It was the result of recognizing months earlier that things weren't heading in a good direction and acting on that recognition. I saw leadership turnover, budget constraints, missed targets, projects canceled. The signs that restructuring might be coming weren't subtle if you paid attention. So I started looking strategically, built relationships with recruiters, interviewed at growing companies, evaluated opportunities, positioned myself to have options before I needed them. When DataCore announced layoffs, I wasn't scared because I'd already secured something better. I wasn't scrambling because I'd planned ahead. I wasn't trapped because I'd created alternatives. If you're in an organization where you see warning signs, leadership departures, budget pressures, declining performance, increasing stress with decreasing resources, don't wait for official restructuring announcements to start exploring options. By then, you're competing with everyone else who just got laid off or who survived but wants out. Start now. Update your network. Have conversations. Interview. Understand your market value and what opportunities exist. Then, if restructuring comes, you're ready. And if it doesn't, you still know your options and can make informed decisions about your career. If this resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe. Share your experiences in the comments about leaving before restructuring happened or seeing the signs that layoffs were coming. Those stories help others recognize when it's time to take proactive action. Remember, they announced restructuring like it would scare me into compliance, make me grateful just to keep my job, make me work harder for less while colleagues were laid off. But I'd already accepted another offer. I'd already planned my exit. They were too late. And that's exactly why timing matters when you control it.